Broadcast Center. Thank our friends at Deepwater Wind for helping us out. And we have Mr. Innovation, Saul Kaplan. Happy President's Day.
President's Day, yes.
Favorite
Yes.
president? Who's your favorite?
I say Harry Truman, just because most people don't say him. But,
They don't say him? They don't
imagine
say a
trying-
lot of them.
Imagine trying to follow FDR.
Yeah, right.
You know,
Right. And the first thing you have to do is drop a bomb on people?
Yeah,
I
there
mean,
you go.
right. Yeah.
That's not really what I was thinking about. I was thinking about everything he did after that, but yeah, okay.
Yeah. No, it's, I'm a Teddy Roosevelt guy.
Yeah. That's what, Rough
and
Rider.
Rough Rider,
Yeah.
created the modern police department when he was
Yeah.
New York City commissioner, did just
He loved nature,
a
was
million
big on
things,
parks,
loved
national
nature,
park,
first in a
yeah.
submarine,
Yeah.
first to travel abroad, just a gazillion
Yeah.
different firsts.
Right.
And, tough as nails, but also compassionate, lots of different things. URI Rams, just touch on that real quick. A tough loss at St. Bonaventure.
Well, we chalked this up to learning lesson. We had to lose one, as we head in. So the coach will have locker room fodder to beat them up a little bit.
I'm
It was
with you.
disappointing. We like to win them all, but it's a heck of a run.
Yeah, it's a
We're
pretty good
excited. I'm going to go to the Dayton game on Friday here to send them off to the tournament. So,
I believe we have tapped the sports editor down at the URI radio station as he covers both the A10 tournament and
Yeah.
the NCAA. He's going to be Skyping in and giving us
good.
updates.
It's exciting.
So that'll
Go-
give us
go
some,
Rhodey.
go Rhodey. Let's talk about education. Last week we were talking about the bond issue that Governor Raimondo, and shockingly to me, Mr. Innovation was talking about warm, safe, dry. Is that the standard for invigorating the Providence School Department? Let me give you some numbers.
Uh-oh.
Okay, so these are the park tests.
Look, here's a spreadsheet.
Oh, I did my homework for this one.
Uh-oh.
For the city of Providence, the 98% of the kids took the park test,
Yeah.
and in the, I believe this is literacy. This is the literacy. 17% of the students were proficient. Now, proficient does not mean you get a 4-year no-cut scholarship to Harvard. It means maybe you get a chance to pass entry-level classes at CCRI. That's what educators say.
Right.
Proficient is a pretty low standard.
Correct.
Okay? That's 17%. In Portsmouth, it's 52%. Let's go over to math, and the number drops down to 14%.
Yeah.
Okay? This is across the whole city. This
Right.
is classical included,
Right.
etc. Don't we need to, by the way, 25 years ago when I was on the Providence City Council, and regardless of what test scores you look at, whether it's
Right.
Park or this or that or
Right.
the other, it's always about the same. It's just dismal.
Well, we resisted the testing for a long time and changed the tests, and so we can't agree.
We
on
can't change the tests enough.
We can't agree on the bar, whereas Massachusetts set a bar, and they worked hard over a very long period of time, to achieve it and exceed it. We've had trouble actually setting a bar that everyone agrees with. So it's really hard to look longitudinally at performance. No matter how you slice it, no matter what test you use, those proficiency numbers are abysmal. Right?
Abysmal.
And the school system will say that it is, and they'll constantly be looking for how they're going to improve them. I look at it and I say, look, you can incrementally change what we do today, and you might be able to do better than that low bar, but that's not what we need. We need to reimagine education. We need to transform it, not tweak it, and I'm glad to have the conversation with you. I'm getting tired of talking about Amazon and Uber. Let's talk about
GE,
stuff that matters here
CVS.
locally.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it matters for our economy. So this is a real business issue. If we don't fix and transform our education system, and create the 21st century workforce, how are we ever going to be competitive? It's the most important element of our business climate. It's the one that we haven't really been bold enough in changing. And it's true across the strait, but it's particularly true here in Providence. You cited the proficiency numbers. The graduation rates are creeping up. I don't know that that's a great measure, but
I don't think it's
79% in Providence, 85% in the state. The number that really gets me is, can we at least start with, how about if we actually show up, right? if you look at the absenteeism rates, like you look at them in Providence, there are, a very significant number of students, that were out more than 18 days. I forget the number. It's like 30%. You probably have it in your spreadsheet here of students that miss 18 cents or more. Even was 58% of teachers in the Providence
Correct.
school system, right, miss 10 or more days in here. So let's
But
start
if you
with
break
what
down that number alone, students missing days, faculty missing days, much higher than any other community in the state. Doesn't that in and of itself show that the system's broken? It's not because the flu is more proficient
That's right.
or anything else. It's that people don't want to be there.
They're not engaged.
They're not
and
engaged.
And both sides of that, right? We can't, if students aren't showing up for school, how could we ever expect to improve the outcomes
Right.
while they're in school? And then if teachers aren't showing up in school, right, you have a systems problem. You have a systematic problem that tweaks are not going to fix. So we've got to talk about how do you transform it. I know you like to use you like to talk about blowing things up. It's just in your nature. I don't talk about blowing things up. Transformation doesn't mean stopping doing everything you're doing today and all of a sudden tomorrow we're going to wake up and do something different. It doesn't mean that.
But let me push back a little bit.
You always do.
If we've been at
Yep.
this for 25, 30, 50 years,
Yep.
and we've had smart superintendents come in, we spend per pupil as much as almost anyone in the country, so it's not a lack of financial resources or anything else. And we've had smart people, and we've had Brown University bring the best, smartest people together. At what point do we blow it up?
Yeah,
How many decades
Well,
of
what I wanna
failed
talk about-
spending,
first of
of
all,
failed
when
education?
you talk about blowing it up, right, now you're going to really have an us-them kind of mentality. Let's look at what we did with charter schools, right? It's pretty clear that we can, if we have a clean sheet of paper, that we can create a better school. We can create a school where students will be engaged and motivated. We can create a school where we get better outcomes that we all desperately want. We have lots of charter schools
We have waiting lists
that have demonstrated that, right? But what happened? We created what I call the us-them mentality, right? It's the charters versus the rest of the public school system. Even if the charters are public schools, and we created this us-them where if they do well, it means we can't. If they take $1, it means they took it from us, and we've created this us-them mentality that we're not getting anywhere with. What we have to do is think about change differently. It's not blow up the core system. We have to figure out how to transform the core system, but you don't start by blowing it up. You start by demonstrating what good looks like. What is it, instead of having a charter school with an us-them mentality, why don't we have the public school systems leading the change, creating the new models, figuring out what works? Why don't we have charter schools accountable for helping our core system get better? Not just bragging about how good they are, but actually being in service of helping us change the core.
So one night you go out and you're at a bar and URI's playing Harvard in the first round. And right next to you, hold on, right next to you is Jorge Alorza.
Yeah.
And you bet on the game.
Yeah.
And you bet you want $1,000. And he says if Harvard beats URI, you have to be the superintendent of schools in Providence. Lo and behold, upset three-pointer at the buzzer from half court. Harvard beats URI. You're stuck being the superintendent of education. What are you going to do? Is it safe, warm, and cooler, warmer?
No.
Is that the strategy?
Last
Cooler,
week,
warmer?
last week we talked about having buildings that are safe. This week, let's talk about what we would actually do to transform schools. First of all, we're going to take our innovation strategy and we're going to divide it into two pieces. One is innovating within the context of the way the current system works, continuing to get better incrementally, and the other is to take actual resources and people and actually say, you are going to model the transformation. What does the change look like if we don't constrain you? What if we give you the ability to use all the levers available to you to get students more engaged, to create more motivation of students, to figure out what the measures are that we're excited about and all committed to, and let's actually show what that looks like. Let's do what we did with charter schools, but let's do it within the context of the core system. Now, the problem politically is the change I'm talking about won't happen within an election cycle. It just won't.
Okay,
It
but I've
takes
got a
longer than
ninth,
that.
hypothetically, I have a
Right.
ninth grader.
Right.
Do I have to wait till my ninth grader has a ninth
Well,
grader?
If you want to talk about the current situation, you're going to do everything you can to make it better for every student. That you're going to use technology, you're going to train teachers, you're going to do all the traditional things we've been talking about doing for a very long time, and you're going to continue to improve it. Transformation requires you to model it and then to scale what works. It takes a long time, just like turning our economy.
Okay, but
does,
let's grab
right?
this. Charter schools have demonstrated in certain
Right.
situations
Correct.
a higher level of achievement than the standard Providence public schools. Now, you can say they're getting the better student, they're getting the more engaged parent, whatever it is.
They're not perfect.
But they're not perfect.
You have to look at the charter schools too, and
Yep.
that they need to be accountable. But yeah, if you give them the conditions to actually innovate,
Yep.
charter schools have demonstrated that they can, but they did it outside of the current system.
Okay.
We got to do it within the system so that we're actually developing the system we want and evolving new models that work better for students. The way we've been going about it isn't working. We need a different way to do it, but we're going to have the patience to do it. We keep changing administrators, we keep changing policy, we don't agree on the tests, and all that time, look what just over the border at what Massachusetts has done with a long-term sustained commitment to their schools,
Right.
a benchmark for achievement that they held themselves accountable for, right? The publication of data to show who was hitting the bar and who wasn't, right? They made the tough choices and they stayed with it, and it's really paid off for them. And this is the state right next door. We're not
Right.
talking about a
And it's-
state,
right.
by the way.
And it's driven their economy.
And you can look at all the times we had leaders here that tried to do parts of that and how they got shut down here, right? Because we didn't make the changes. We're paying a price for that now. In order to get out of it, yeah, we've got to make what we're currently doing work as good as we can for the students there. We've got to experiment with new models, and when we find them, we need to be off to the races scaling them. And then we need political will to do it, and we need politicians who know
So let's go to political
education
will.
is a long-term thing, that it isn't just what you did this year. It's the path that you put us on for a stronger and better educated youth and workforce.
So in the course of the past couple decades, there have been at least 2, maybe 3 business-driven efforts to improve Providence Public Schools.
Right.
And they started with great enthusiasm, had captains of industry, however you want to describe captains of industry, and then lost momentum and fell apart. I would say right now, if there is one, we are not aware of it. That there's a strong group of business leaders or community leaders now poised together, brought together with resources to try and force change. Why isn't that happening? Why is this just become a lost third rail kind of issue that there seems to be no urgency about?
No, there needs to be more urgency around it. I totally agree with you that business needs to be a stakeholder in it. They're not the only stakeholder,
Right.
but the future of our economy depends on it, right? They'll constantly say they can't fill the jobs, that they have now, and they want
Listen,
someone
we
to
have
wave the wand.
CEOs in. We had
Right.
Rajiv in the other day. Whatever he's got, 100 vacancies. General Dynamics has 100. You go on Lifespan, Hasbro. They all have vacancies.
Lots of jobs.
Lots
but
of
the
jobs.
workforce doesn't line up with
No,
that.
not in
Doesn't
the
line up
slightest.
with it. And the fix for that is rethinking education and workforce development. And it means thinking really big without the constraints. And it means starting small and then scaling fast. You can't wave a magic wand and fix these systems problems overnight. It's a systems problem, requires a system solution, and it takes time, political will, persistence to stay with this. We were on the right track with what charter schools are doing, right? We just made the mistake of treating them as if they were outside of the school system, right? As opposed to the way we're going to transform the school system. How about we take the practices that are working in some of these charter schools and figure out how to put them back in the public schools? How about we look at some of these new models? Right? It's not just one point solution that's the answer. It's putting all of these things together in a new way with the student at the center. Right? Here's what happened in our country. Right? The social contract changed. It used to be, that some kids went off on a college prep path and went to college,
Right.
and the rest of the kids went off with a trade or something that they could do, make a good living in a manufacturing-driven economy.
Absolutely.
Right? And we pulled the rug out from under the industrial era economy, and we kept the same school system, the same solution that we had under the old social contract. Now the social contract says everybody in Rhode Island has to have some kind of post-secondary credential. Maybe it isn't a college degree, but it's some credential of or evidence of competence that's relevant to today's economy. And we haven't put the systems in place to do it, and we haven't had the political will to make the bolder change. And we've had a lot of pressure, coming in from incumbents in the current system that are trying to protect and argue that it's just we're not putting enough money behind it. When you look at the numbers, we put plenty of money against education, right? And you can look at the benchmarks of what other states,
Per pupil
even
spending
Northeast
is, yep.
states, put behind it.
Listen, Ted Eddy, the former president of URI, and Dan Challoner in 1995 analyzed all the similar cities to Providence across the country and found that in almost every single case, by every single measure, Providence invested the most per pupil and had the worst outcomes. And these were against other urban, this wasn't against Barrington and East Greenwich, this was against other cities that had large immigration pools, that had diverse populations, that had,
And this
in a lot
isn't
of
just a
cases-
problem here in Providence. You travel across the country.
But we
our
might-
urban
but-
public school systems are not performing, and we're not being bold enough to create the transformational models with students at the center, right? That students would be excited about, right? When you have these kinds of absenteeism rates, it's not just about what
Right.
happens in school. It's about how what happens at school, connects to what's happening
And I don't
at home.
want to insult Baltimore and Detroit, but maybe we're better than Baltimore and Detroit. Maybe we're not. I didn't look at those numbers. But even if that's the bar, that's not the bar we need to
But if you
produce.
look at what's going on,
Right.
in Detroit, I've been watching what's going on in Detroit, right? There's a lot of good, they knew they had the urgency, obviously, right? They had to make changes. They made really bold changes. If you go to Detroit today, you're gonna see some of the changes in the trajectory that could improve these outcomes, right? What I don't see here is the boldness of the solutions. I see a lot of point solutions. I see a lot of rhetoric. We tend to drive the change agents.
But you even,
out, right?
well, of course, we had
Right. People that are leaders that have come here, and have tried to
Shake it
apply,
up.
to shake it up, right? Have bumped into what we're famous for here.
Right.
We will wait you out.
Yeah.
Right. We will wait you out, and we will wear you down. And the change will go back, and will invent. This is what's happened in not just education here in Rhode Island, over and over and over again. And we got to blow through that. On education, almost more than anything, you can tell how excited I get about thinking about innovation in the context of the things that really matter: education, healthcare, our government. These are the things
Why
we
is there
gotta change.
why is there no outrage?
Right.
Why is there no outrage?
There
Why
should-
isn't the discussion about this? Why, there's a lot of discussions. I mean, if we took the last 100 articles in all the different publications, news publications about the city of Providence, focusing in on this wouldn't be 3% of those articles.
Yeah, no, it's that's the saddest thing for me, that we went through a period where there was some leadership that was bolder, that was trying to change some things. They got worn down, and we couldn't agree on the testing.
Yeah.
We tried to point fingers at each other. Now we've stopped charter schools from putting up new examples of what good looks like,
Yeah.
right? As opposed to stitching them more closely in to the public schools and trying to together, to transform this thing. I thought the commissioner, Ken Wagner had a good idea of trying to put some innovation programming in with some resources to allow schools to volunteer to go after that. He got
Yep.
shut down, up at the General Assembly, and we didn't do it, right? And we've been so slow at putting in the benchmarks and the graduation requirements to hold the system accountable. And now I'm afraid, we're still working at the margins, and I agree with you. I don't think we put enough urgency on this. And I would love to see all of our leaders it's easy to point to 5 or 6 things you've done, that will contribute to some kind of improvement at some point. It's another thing to say, we're going all in on this, we're gonna
Right.
fix it, we're gonna collectively be accountable to do it, even if it means that hurts me politically, right? Because this is important, this is the future of our youth. Well, I was very encouraged this week, you saw the school shooting, that we're all talking about this week. The only thing new, in this, is that the students themselves,
are mobilized.
look like they're starting to mobilize, and that, to me, is the most optimistic thing. If we want to fix education, why aren't we asking the people with the biggest stake in the future of this lively experiment that we run here in Rhode
Absolutely.
Island, right, to actually be at the center of helping us design it, a system they would be more committed to and engaged in. Instead, what do? All the adults, right, think they know better. The students are not even in the conversation. So I think.
No, I think this is a
yeah,
game
like-
changer. I think what
right.
you're seeing out of there are slews. I mean, it's amazing how articulate the students down in Broward
Pretty
County
impressive,
are
right?
out of that high school,
Yeah.
and how they, within 48 hours,
Right.
had a strategy, a political
Yeah.
action strategy that is almost
pretty cool.
soundproof.
Now, here's what I hope. Like,
Well, in March,
we gotta
there's gonna
let
be
this-
an event.
well, we gotta let the youth design
Yeah.
the approach. These are digital natives that know how to use social media, as well as all the folks that are, that are leaning against this
Yeah.
thing. And I hope they don't just get steered by the adults again.
Yeah.
Like, put on a march, right?
Right.
March, everybody shows up, then everybody goes. Like, no, be more creative than that. Like, let's actually listen to youth, right? And let them design the path to the change that we need for, gun control is one thing, come back to education itself.
Right.
You wanna fix education, right, until you actually put students at the center of the table, of the change table, so that they can help design what they would actually do and be engaged in, we're gonna keep changing it incrementally.
So let's leverage that. Why aren't students outraged? I mean, kids don't live in a vacuum anymore. They have access to as much information as you and I do, and that they can see that, listen, I don't want to go to a school system that has 14% proficiency in mathematics. I want to have the opportunities that the entire world lends itself to. Why isn't there more outrage at that base level? Parents, students, forget administrators and the political infrastructure.
Yeah, there are pockets that you see now, even here in Rhode Island, youth in action, youth groups that are, I call them self-organized purposeful networks. And you're absolutely right, students are starting to figure out that not only are they articulate and have clear points of view about this, but they have a voice, and today they have channels and ways to organize that they never had, right? So I think we should be encouraged, as uncomfortable as that makes some people, we should be encouraging that.
Right.
The same way patients should be at the center of the future healthcare system, and citizens should be at the center of our government systems, students and youth should be at the center of what we do in education, and yet they have the biggest stake in the future, and they're not there. They're not at these strategy discussions. They're not at the discussions about what direction should we take, right? I'm so encouraged by what I see youth doing here locally, and then this week what I see youth doing nationally. I hope that becomes a movement that gets applied not just to gun control, but to all the other things that youth feel really strongly about. And we should help them, we should enable them. This is the kind of platform we should be putting in. We've gotten away from that in education. We've gotten completely, this is part of the problem.
But haven't
right?
we worn ourselves out with the reform of the du jour, right?
Yeah,
I
no,
mean,
that's right.
Every 5 years there's a new reform strategy that doesn't ever seem to go particularly anywhere. And doesn't fully get implemented. I mean, maybe all of them would have worked if they actually got implemented, but there's always a new one that's sweeping
But you know what
across.
the answer is? Here's the problem. We think that there's a magic bullet.
That's
and
right.
that there's one answer, and if
Correct.
we do that one thing, it's gonna fix it. Transformation doesn't work that way. You cannot analyze your way to transformation. You have to
test. So it's
a
no different
generative-
than your argument
like-
about what makes Jeff Bezos successful.
Exactly right.
Constantly testing
Experiment
something
all the time, right? Put students at the center, experiment with things that students are excited about, and figure out what it takes for them to apply what
But
they're
isn't that
learning.
a danger zone for
Yep.
this? Let's say you're the, usually when we do our rankings of the public high schools in Rhode Island, Mount Pleasant always ranks first.
Yep.
I think we've done it 6 times in 8 years, and Mount Pleasant, unfortunately, is always the worst rank. So you become the principal at Mount Pleasant High School. You go to the superintendent. He says, listen, we've got to reinvigorate, go try something. Let's say it doesn't work. Your strategy doesn't work. You're dead, gone, buried, never to work again in education.
No, well, listen, not the way I would do it, because if I were the principal of the...
Well, you're going to be superintendent after the staff court shop.
They'll put me out of business because I'll try a lot of stuff, and then sooner or later someone will come in, and that's fine, I'll try it somewhere else. We need more people. You look at the population being served at Mount Pleasant right now, you think the traditional model that works in Barrington is going to work at Mount Pleasant? You think the same statistics, the same measures, right? How about we actually design things that work for the students that we're trying to serve in the communities we're trying to serve? Right? If Providence has a different student population and we need to do some things different with different connections in the community, right? Then we should be trying those things. We should be exploring them and seeing if they work. And then when they do.
Are our expectations in Rhode Island as a whole simply too low? And I'll give you an example. And I didn't look at the park test, but a few years ago we did. And, places like Weston, Mass, 98% proficient. Barrington's like 78% proficient. Similar affluence, maybe Weston's a little richer. But in Weston, if they dropped to 96%, there would be riots amongst the Mercedes and Land Rovers. In Barrington, they're okay with 78%. It's the best in Rhode Island, or it's tied with East Greenwich or whatever it is. Shouldn't we be expecting everything across the board to move up, to really compete? Because this world is flat now, right?
Well, this is a good point.
When you want that job over at Rajiv's company, you're not competing against the guy from Middletown and North Smithfield like you used to. You're competing with anybody in the world who could potentially do that job online or do it virtually or come and move here in 15 minutes to take that job away from you.
Well, here's the thing, right? So we always go right to, and we should, we go to underserved populations, urban populations, right, with lower proficiency scores, and then we in Rhode Island, East Greenwich, Barrington, right? And so, we need to do it differently for sure in Providence. You'd think there would be more urgency, as we've already talked about, but even if you ask me about the schools in the suburban areas, they need to reimagine and reinvent. You think the model that they're using, which was invented 100 years ago, just because they have families and parents that are more
highly educated,
so,
read to them as a young age.
I don't give just because they get better outcomes doesn't mean that they don't have to rethink education too. Because if they think the kids that are going through that program, are relevant, relative to the global educated, we're losing competitiveness in America, and it's not just in the underserved urban areas; it's across the board. If you're going to fix a problem first, of course, we got to go into the cities, right? And we got to figure out how to put these different models in play. And we didn't do the R&D for these new models. We took the solution du jour, as you said. We threw technology at it. I don't know, I read like $60 billion we've thrown of new technology into the schools and then said, how come we're not getting better outcomes? As if you could fix this with just one kind of point solution or change. You got to try a lot of different things. I just finished a term as the chair of Big Picture Learning. They're the parent organization of the Met School here, one of the really successful urban charters. And every board meeting we start and we listen to students that are all inner city kids that are incredibly articulate and passionate, and their education was built around their experience. It made them want to learn. They wanted to learn literacy and numeracy and all these other things because they realized it was necessary to do what they wanted to do in the world. So they were pulling their education and engaged in it, as opposed to what you see in the rest of the public schools, where the
But
kids
Dennis Litke, who's one of the founders, has been a 50-year, 40-something year veteran of innovation and chaos and flipping the table and reinventing things and having massive successes and massive failures.
Lasted this long in Rhode Island too.
Oh,
imagine that. He's amazing. He's one of my favorite innovators of all time.
And a total street fighter too.
Because he's persistent. Many other people like him would have gone out of Rhode Island and found a more conducive environment. to do what he's doing. He's got a college that he started,
Right.
College Unbound, if you've heard him. And he is sticking with it. I love his persistence here in this community,
Right.
despite all of the 8,000 reasons and obstacles, to doing what he's trying to do. We need more people like him, and we need to pay more attention, right? What did he learn
Right.
that we can use back in the public schools instead of treating the innovator like they're the enemy, right? That's the mistake we've made, and we've got to fix
But
that.
he knows the big politics of this. He knows how to get Clay Christensen up at Harvard
Does.
to bite into and
Does.
come down and give the speech and all that sort of stuff. How do we? We've got a couple more minutes. How do we spark the demand? This new focus, youth-driven, on gun violence started by a tragedy, and does it require that the proficiency rate drops to 0? We're at 17 and 14% right now, right?
Please.
Almost you couldn't get worse mathematically. Literally, it's almost impossible to get worse. And by the way, we could work really hard and get it all the way up to 18 and 15%.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
Those
by
things
incremental.
don't. Right.
Even that's not going to change the game. I used to think that if we could just yak enough to our leaders, right, either in the school systems and in government, and showed them all the data, that the urgency would be there. It just isn't, right, for all the reasons we've talked about it. So I believe the one place that we should be creating the conditions is for students themselves to organize, just to organize students that want to do better, that want their schools to be better, that want their communities to be better. Let's figure out how to give them a voice. Let's figure out, and not just for lobbying purposes.
Yeah, right.
I'm talking about a voice that can then engage. Let's create the resources and conditions for them to, okay, what would school look like if you were to design it? Can you imagine?
Well, politicians get immune to it. When I joined the city council, I guess the year before I had joined, there was going to be a cut to the libraries, and the libraries got together and got all the little kids to come and give testimony in the city council, and it saved the funding that year. The next year, the council, when I joined, was so immune to that. They were like, who cares who the hell comes
That's why
up
I
with
hope
here?
that the kids are smarter than just listening to the adults say, have a march.
Yeah.
Right? I hope, have a march, but you gotta do way more than have a march.
Right.
You gotta figure out how to turn.
You need 6 million Twitter followers.
right.
You need.
They have them. See, this is the beauty of youth. They've been on social media, right? They are
But not
digital natives.
but not collective.
Not in a
Not in a Donald.
self-organized,
Listen,
purposeful
what's
way.
Donald Trump got now?
Right.
He had 5 million when he
Right.
was running for president, 20 million now, whatever it is. That's power.
Right.
That's power.
And
The
they
megaphone.
And they're starting to realize it, and they're starting to organize, and we should be enabling them, giving them our wisdom, access to our tools, and the resources to help them design the future they want. And what better place to start than education?
Last thoughts. Are we going to see change in education in Providence, Rhode Island as a whole? What's it going to take? Is it the next recession where we really can't compete? We're at a time of growth for the most part in this economy. We've got vacant jobs in places, and then we've got folks who are just wildly underskilled for the job vacancies here. Those jobs, in most cases, majority of cases, are going to be filled by somebody who doesn't live in Rhode Island. It may be good to bring more people to Rhode Island, but that's not going to help the people who graduated from Classical or Central or Cranston East or Tolman or any place else, who just simply, after 4 years of high school, do not have the skills to go to a 4-year college or to become a tradesperson.
Well, you know what breaks it? And you see this in the economy, right? Because you see a lot of these low-wage, entry-level jobs going away. A lot of the retail jobs.
Absolutely.
Those are great starter jobs.
Right.
They're not end jobs, but they're good places to start, to learn, to be in the workforce. And we've lost a lot of them. This puts enormous pressure back on, and then you go back to education and workforce development. And so I think this thing is at a tipping point here in Rhode Island, where we're either going to get on with transforming our education and workforce development systems, right, or we're going to find out that you can't keep recruiting these companies to come here because there's no workforce here. It's not like our population is growing, so you've got to improve the competence of the workforce, and that only happens through education and workforce development. and that takes a while to do it. So we need our leaders, you know, to put stakes in the ground, but not just short-term goals, not just claiming success, you know, on the short term, but putting us on a path like they did in Massachusetts to, we're committed to this, but we're gonna make sure that we keep electing people that take the baton from the previous administrations as opposed to changing it.
And by the
You know,
way, it
it's-
didn't
it's-
matter in
yeah.
Massachusetts if they were Republicans or
Correct.
Democrats. I mean, a lot of it happened under Governor Dukakis, but it kept going under Romney and Weld and
Because the state
So-
was, people that lived
Salucci
there
and-
was committed to it.
Right.
And we need to be committed to it, and I think it's gonna take our youth to put our feet to the fire to do it.
I want to thank Saul Kaplan. Thank everybody for tuning in. It is Business Monday. Tomorrow, Tuesday, we'll have Ava Gaudette, and she's got an all-star kind of lineup at the 3 o'clock hour, and then Kate Nagel's on with famous professor Jennifer Lawless at American University, who was just announced has signed to go to University of Virginia for an endowed chair in politics. Yeah. So Professor Lawless will be leaving American, heading down to Charlottesville, one of the great American universities in the country, and we look forward to hearing more about that. Everybody, thanks for tuning in on Business Monday. See you back tomorrow, 3 o'clock.